Welcome to the debate. What happens when the most dangerous thing about a new technology isn't that it makes catastrophic mistakes, but that it's so incredibly efficient, it completely robs us of the struggle required to become experts,
Yeah, it's a terrifying thought, honestly.
right? We're standing at the edge of this massive restructuring in how human cognitive effort is valued, and the machinery driving this shift is completely invisible. So today we are dissecting the profound impact of artificial intelligence on workplace productivity. And we're going to look at this specifically through two distinct and frankly deeply opposed viewpoints that are defining the modern economy right now.
And those viewpoints are basically colliding in every boardroom and every Slack channel right now. You have management relentlessly focused on results, efficiency, and massive scalability. And on the flip side, you have the creative professionals, the analysts, the knowledge workers, who look at those exact same efficiency metrics and see the rapid mathematical reality of job substitution. We are fundamentally redefining the unit of labor.
Which makes this, easily the most critical economic conversation of our decade. So I am going to argue from the management and organizational efficiency perspective today. Because when we look at the raw data of how AI is being integrated into modern workflows, it is unequivocally the ultimate productivity multiplier. It's a fundamental redesign of the architecture of work, empowering teams to achieve, unprecedented output without sacrificing quality.
Well, and I'll be arguing from the perspective of the professionals on the ground, the creatives and the execution level talent, because from where they're sitting, terms like operational scalability and, efficiency gains, they're really just management euphemisms for systematic substitution.
You really think so?
Absolutely. AI is fundamentally hollowing out the creative and analytical professions by completely commoditizing human labor.
Okay, well, let's ground this in the mechanics of what is actually happening inside organizations right now. Like, if you are a director of operations today, your mandate is to maximize human capital, right?
Sure.
But look at how knowledge workers historically spent their time. We are not talking about the outdated, 2021 era examples of using AI to sort emails or schedule meetings.
Right, it's way past that.
Exactly. Today, we have these multi-agent frameworks capable of executing complex API integrations. They're running dynamic sentiment analysis across thousands of live customer interactions and generating production-ready code blocks in real time.
Yeah, but
By deploying these systems, just to finish the thought, management is fundamentally changing the equation between human effort and organizational output. You have small, agile teams accomplishing the volume of work that used to require a massive corporate footprint.
And that is exactly the problem.
Wait, how is efficiency a problem? They are doing it by shifting the human role from manual execution to high-level system orchestration. AI is stripping away the cognitive drudgery, right? It allows humans to focus entirely on high-value strategy.
The mathematical reality of that shift is exactly what should terrify anyone who makes a living through cognitive or creative output. You call it shifting from execution to orchestration. I call it downsizing. Let's look at the mechanics of a modern creative workflow. If you're a creative director listening to this right now, you know exactly what the pressure feels like. You have designers, copywriters, video producers watching generative models, brainstorm concepts, spit out 50 variations of a campaign, and produce highly refined visual assets in fractions of a second.
Yeah, which is incredibly useful.
Useful, yes, but when management sees a 10-person agency utilizing AI to push out the volume of a 50-person agency, they don't, pat those 10 people on the back and hire 40 more to do high-value strategy.
They
realize they just no longer need the other 40. If one designer, armed with an agentic workflow, can output the work of 5 human beings, the direct mathematical result is substitution. The AI is not a digital paintbrush anymore, it is the painter.
Look, you are assuming the goal of business is to maintain a static level of output and just cut costs. But efficiency breeds demand.
Does it always, though?
Yes. If a marketing team can suddenly test 50 A/B variations of a campaign in the time it used to take to build one, they don't fire the team, they scale the testing. They go after entirely new markets. Let's dig into the blank page problem, because this has historically been the single biggest bottleneck in any creative endeavor.
Okay.
Staring at a blinking cursor is cognitively exhausting. Generative AI removes this barrier entirely by instantly providing a structural foundation or, sketching out initial visual wireframes or establishing a baseline narrative structure. It eliminates that paralyzing friction of starting from absolute zero.
Right. It gives you a starting point.
Exactly. It makes creativity scalable. The human is still the central director of the strategy, but that bottleneck of raw manual production is gone.
But the bottleneck of raw production is precisely where human craft is forged. I mean, your framing of the blank page sounds incredibly efficient until we unpack the mechanism of how these models actually generate that baseline.
What do you mean?
Well, an LLM is, at its core, a statistical engine, right? It operates on probabilistic word prediction and vector mapping based on massive training data sets. By definition, it generates the most statistically probable response.
Sure, it predicts the next token.
Right, which means it produces the average, the mean. So when a machine drafts the outline and generates the visual variations and refines the tone, it is feeding the human operator a mathematically safe, middle-of-the-road concept. The human being is no longer the creator. They are essentially downgraded to an editor on an assembly line.
I wouldn't call it an assembly line.
They're just trying to inject some life into a fundamentally derivative product. Management is taking the creative process and turning it into a high-volume, low-margin commodity.
See, I disagree with that characterization entirely. Editing requires a profoundly higher level of critical thinking than raw drafting.
Really?
Yes. If the machine provides the baseline, the statistical average, as you put it, then the human's entire job is to provide the spiky, contrarian value. The human injects the taste, the cultural resonance, the specific brand voice that a probabilistic model just cannot accurately synthesize. We are elevating the creative from a pixel pusher to an art director.
Okay, come on. Let's be real about the ecosystem of an agency or a corporate department here. What strategy is a 23-year-old junior copywriter actually doing?
Well, they're learning the ropes.
No, their job is the execution. They are hired to push the pixels, to write the baseline copy, to build those 50 variations. If management automates the execution because the machine can do it instantly, that junior role just vanishes.
Not necessarily.
Yes, it does. You cannot promote an entire entry-level workforce to art directors. The pyramid requires a massive base of execution-level workers, and if you automate the base, you sever the pipeline of human talent entirely.
But you are looking at the micro level of single roles. We have to zoom out to the macro level of organizational efficiency. The decoupling of raw human effort from final output extends across the entire enterprise. Consider the organizational friction of a global network.
Okay.
Human beings experience cognitive fatigue. We have latency. We sleep. AI agentic workflows operate continuously 24/7. Look at global logistics or highly technical customer support pipelines. We now have autonomous systems that can ingest a complex technical failure from a user, query the internal database, run a diagnostic via an API, and resolve the issue before a human agent even logs in.
Which, again, eliminates the need for the human agent.
No. For management, this decoupling of raw manpower from output is an absolute triumph of operational architecture. It perfectly balances the system. The machines handle the high-volume, continuous processing, which actually protects the human workforce from burnout, reserving their cognitive bandwidth for severe edge cases and high-stakes negotiation.
I'm sorry, but the idea that management is implementing these systems to, protect the human workforce from burnout is a utopian fantasy. It completely ignores the reality of market incentives.
How so?
Because the decoupling of effort and output doesn't lead to a balanced partnership. It leads to an insatiable thirst for unchecked autonomy. If you want to see the terminal velocity of this trend, just look at high-frequency trading in the global financial system.
Well, finance has always been an outlier in terms of technological adoption speed. You can't really compare it to a creative agency.
It is not an outlier. It is the blueprint. In modern finance, AI doesn't just assist an analyst. It makes autonomous, real-time decisions in milliseconds. Algorithms are analyzing risk, executing trades, and rebalancing portfolios based on market signals that a human brain literally cannot perceive in real time.
Right, because of the data volume.
Exactly. And in that environment, human intervention isn't seen as a strategic advantage, it is seen as latency. A human is just a bottleneck, slowing down the trade.
Yeah, but
My warning here is that creative, administrative, and logistical industries are next. Once a competitor agency uses autonomous creative generation to lower their bids and deliver campaigns in hours instead of weeks, your agency has to follow suit. The drive for scale and reduced operational overhead will push human involvement to the absolute margins. We'll be sidelined because we're simply too slow.
look, the velocity of modern financial algorithms is staggering. Yes, I'll give you that. But applying that logic as a blanket rule to all knowledge work fundamentally misrepresents how value is generated outside of a microsecond arbitrage trade.
Is it really that different, though?
It is. In creative work, in product development, and legal strategy, speed is only one variable. Human context is the anchor. The most productive organizations are not the ones blindly handing the keys to autonomous agents. They're the ones building really tight feedback loops between human judgment and machine execution.
Okay, but
You mentioned edge cases earlier. When a system encounters an edge case, a novel problem that exists completely outside of its training distribution, it fails. Humans are required to navigate the latent space that the machine cannot comprehend. Furthermore, AI is accelerating the learning curve for junior talent, not destroying it.
wait, how is it accelerating it?
Instead of struggling in the dark, a junior employee now has a dedicated, omniscient tutor that can instantly explain complex internal code bases or parse historical data. It allows them to become productive in a fraction of the time.
A tutor that solves the problem for you isn't teaching you, it's pacifying you. And this brings us to the most dangerous unseen consequence of this entire management philosophy, which is skill atrophy in the paradox of the learning curve. You keep talking about humans navigating the edge cases,
Right?
because that is where human critical thinking is entirely irreplaceable.
But how does a human develop the capacity to navigate an edge case?
Expertise is not downloaded, it's the slow, frustrating accumulation of overcoming micro-failures. It is built by staring at that blank page. It is built by spending 3 hours hunting down a circular reference in a complex financial model, or, manually rewriting a terrible headline 50 times until you finally understand the rhythm of a good one. If we deploy AI to handle all the foundational grunt work, the junior employee never builds the internal mental scaffolding required to truly understand the system.
But they learn by reviewing the AI's output. They learn through prompt engineering and rapidly iterating on the results.
Reviewing is not doing. This is the exact phenomenon the aviation industry discovered with automation complacency.
The pilot analogy.
Yes. When you put pilots in highly automated cockpits where the computer flies the plane 99% of the time, the pilot's fundamental stick and rudder skills erode. So when the autopilot suddenly fails because of a bizarre sensor reading and edge case like you said, the pilot doesn't have the muscle memory to recover the aircraft.
Right.
If we outsource the execution of our cognitive work to algorithms, we are setting up our entire knowledge economy for catastrophic system failure. When the current generation of senior experts retires, who is left to oversee the algorithms? A generation of workers who only know how to accept or reject a prompt but have absolutely no idea how the underlying architecture works?
Well, that argument rests on the assumption that the nature of expertise is static. You are basically equating the manual labor of a task with the intellectual value of a task. The aviation analogy is compelling, sure, but let's update it for the cognitive worker.
Okay, let's update it.
Knowing how to manually calculate a logarithm on a slide rule was once a foundational engineering skill, right?
Sure.
But the advent of the digital calculator didn't destroy engineering, it elevated it. It allowed engineers to stop worrying about the arithmetic and start designing skyscrapers. Yes, future workers might not know how to manually construct a pivot table from scratch or write the basic boilerplate syntax for a web application, but their expertise will be defined by systems thinking.
Systems thinking.
Yes. They will understand how to orchestrate complex chains of AI agents to solve macro-level problems. They are moving up the abstraction layer.
Moving up the abstraction layer is fine, as long as the foundation is solid. But what happens when the foundation rots? Let's talk about the fragility of these systems. AI models are incredibly brittle when forced outside their training parameters. They hallucinate data. They confidently generate code with completely invisible security vulnerabilities.
Which is why you review it.
But if you have a workforce that has only ever operated at the abstraction layer of systems orchestration, they lack the foundational code-level knowledge to debug the mess. Management views the AI as this perfect black box of efficiency. But when that black box inevitably generates a compounding error, say a flawed predictive model in your supply chain that goes unnoticed for 3 months because the human overseers lack the granular expertise to spot it, the cost of that failure will wipe out years of efficiency gains.
And that is precisely why human oversight is the central tenet of the management philosophy I'm defending here. We are not advocating for the removal of the human. We are advocating for the elevation of the human. The fact that an LLM can hallucinate is exactly why you need a highly trained human acting as the final arbiter of truth.
Right, but
By automating the high-volume, low-complexity tasks, management is actually freeing up the budget and the bandwidth to invest in rigorous quality assurance and strategic alignment. Consider a software development pipeline. If AI agents write 80% of the standard code, the senior developers can dedicate their entire week to architectural security, threat modeling, and optimizing the user experience. You don't get architectural rot, you get architectural supremacy, because your best minds aren't bogged down fixing typos in the CSS. AI is acting as a massive force multiplier for human intelligence.
But you are still completely ignoring the economic reality of the junior worker. You keep talking about the senior developers. Where do senior developers come from?
They get trained.
They come from the junior developers who spent 5 years fixing typos in the CSS. You cannot have a workforce comprised entirely of senior architects. If the AI is doing the 80% of standard coding, management will simply hire fewer entry-level developers. The substitution effect is undeniable. We are watching the drawbridge being pulled up on the middle class of the knowledge economy.
I mean,
The efficiency metrics may look fantastic on a quarterly earnings report, sure. The revenue per employee is skyrocketing because a 10-person startup can operate with the footprint of a 50-person enterprise. But the human cost of that operational speed is the wholesale commoditization of creative and analytical craft. We are transferring the power of execution from human professionals to opaque models owned by a handful of tech conglomerates.
it is a profound structural shift. There is absolutely no denying that. And I think we've clearly reached a point of convergence here on the reality of the ground floor. The historic relationship between human effort and organizational output has been permanently, irreversibly altered. Artificial intelligence is no longer just some peripheral software tool you choose to open. It's the invisible infrastructure upon which modern work, creativity, and commerce are being scaled.
Yeah, it is the infrastructure, and it is actively dictating the terms of our employment. The tension we've explored today between management's vision of liberated human potential and the creative's reality of systemic substitution is really the defining labor conflict of our time. And as these systems inch closer to full autonomous execution across more sectors, well, that tension is only going to compound.
Which leaves us right back where we started, looking at the modern invisible factory floor. The cognitive machinery is humming away. The gears are turning faster and more autonomously than any human system ever could. The question that remains for you to decide is whether this hyper-efficient architecture is finally setting us free from the drudgery of the assembly line, or if it's simply replacing us on it.